I'm a speech and language therapist and I work in CAMS in Manchester Foundations Trust, and my pre-doctoral fellowship is based around exploring the impact of Haven, which is a new intervention to support neurodivergent students' social relationships in schools. So a bit of background to the research, as this is really what brought me to my pre-doc, and I was really driven by this change in the shift in thinking for neurodivergent young people. Just a bit of background, so neurodiversity is an umbrella term to represent those who have a difference in the way their brains work. So this often includes things like autism, ADHD or dyslexia, just to name a few. Neurodivergence is commonly associated with differences in communication and interactions, which can make it harder for some neurodivergent people to make and keep friends. And our role as speech and language therapists has traditionally been to support these young people by teaching them how to be develop their social skills. However, we know that this type of support does not necessarily lead to better relationships or friendships. And as a society, we're changing how we think about neurodiversity. And this has led us away from teaching people to be someone that they're not, to consider new ways of supporting individuals with their friendships. But the popularity of this approach has exceeded the research behind it. So that's the research gap. Our speech and language therapy service were really keen to respond to this shift in thinking and developed a new intervention approach called Haven, which stands for Hearing, Accepting and Valuing Every Neurotype. And it's a neurodiversity affirming approach which aims to train schools to create positive social spaces where students can naturally build friendships at school. So in terms of my pre-doc, what brought me here? There's lots of new neurodivergent affirming approaches being introduced, but as mentioned, the evidence for this is lagging behind its popularity, and this highlights the gap in the research. Our initial clinical pilot of Haven was extremely positive, but we wanted to offer it more widely, and to do this, we needed to evaluate the approach to understand the impact. And I wanted to know more about that, and I had a real drive to fill this gap. Although I consider myself an experienced clinician in this area, my experience, knowledge and skills in academic research are a little rusty. And when I came across the pre-doc programme, I could really see a path for a new change, a potential for real-life impact, and also an opportunity to develop my clinical and academic career. I based my pre-doctoral fellowship, therefore, on completing an initial feasibility and acceptability study with the aim to use the outcomes of this to develop an application for further research in this area. I started by using the research development framework to map out my existing strengths and gaps. And this helped me to focus my goals on areas such as literature searches and reviews, developing my knowledge and skills in research methods and design, and some around PPIE. I also had the practical experience of completing this small-scale study based on interviewing students and group facilitators and developing my skills around thematic analysis of the interviews. And this would give me hands-on experience of data collection and analysis alongside formal learning opportunities. And I remember feeling quite daunted and excited about the prospect of this at the same time. So I set out a plan to complete a range of different learning opportunities as shown on this slide. So due to the breadth of my goals, I decided to audit various clinical modules alongside a number of library and NIHR workshops. I also had the hands-on experience of recruiting and interviewing and developing my practical skills in qualitative methods such as thematic analysis. Thanks to the training fund, I was also able to attend a workshop about developing a theory of change, which has been particularly useful in thinking about planning for our next stage of our research and also in terms of my clinical role. I developed awareness and knowledge of PPIE by attending a range of workshops and conference talks, and I applied this learning immediately with sessions with key groups as well as to support planning for our further research. I've attended a number of information sessions based on developing PhD proposals and different career paths, and this has given me a much deeper understanding of what a PhD really involves alongside different options. At the time, I felt the challenges of juggling clinical and academic demands, something that I'm sure many of us can really relate to. Splitting my time and my brain between academic and clinical ways of thinking, for me, was a real challenge. The difference in pace and headspace and confidence was a real push-pull. but with the support of my supervisors and colleagues, I eventually got into a pattern that I could manage. This resulted in a turbulent few months, and I was yo-yoing between what I thought I should do, what I felt like I could do, and what I really wanted to do. And without the opportunity and time to explore these different options, I wouldn't have found a path that suited me. I knew I wanted to continue with my research journey. However, I realised that maybe the PhD path at this time might not have been my best fit. I had lots of conversations with my supervisors, with my other fellowship award holders, with Penny and Ross and other members of the ArcGM team, and this really helped me to give me the confidence to look at different options. So I trooped on, and this slide shows some of my achievements. So just to cover a few highlights, I contributed to an editorial which was published in the Autism Journal. I completed the research study, which had very positive results, which are on my poster. I've not put them here, but if you want to look at my poster, it gives a summary of those results. And I've also presented these results at 2 international conferences, submitted 1 journal article, and have another one on its way. I've also presented at local networking events in a range of contexts across health, education, and public-facing events. What I've been most humbled by, and admittedly a bit surprised in terms of the speed of the impact, is how quickly this has had an impact on my work. This initial small-scale study has had a really wide-reaching impact. I was allocated some additional clinical time earlier this year to update the intervention package in response to the themes from the data that we'd collected. The intervention approach is also being recommended and rolled out at both local and national level and has been included in the Greater Manchester Autism Strategy and also been brought to the Department of Education. The intervention also now has funding to be rolled out across Greater Manchester, and this has led to another change in my clinical role. We're also exploring options to be able to offer it more widely across the UK in response to the conferences that I've presented at. After much deliberation, I've recently made the decision to move away from a PhD proposal, but instead to co-develop a team application for a Nuffield grant along with 2 of my pre-doc supervisors. This will enable me to continue to take the lead with implementing the intervention through my clinical role, which is hugely important to me, alongside having the opportunity to continue to advance research in this area. We now have a team including neurodivergent researchers and representatives from both health and education, and we're hoping to submit the application early 2026. So in summary, it's been an amazing opportunity which has taken me way out of my comfort zone. I feel like I've really started to move through these 4 stages of competence, and this has kind of really rung home to me throughout my journey. I now feel like I'm somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd boxes. I've grown passion in research and confidence in knowing my own strengths, and also a drive to continue to use research to drive change. Finally, I couldn't have done this without the support of my wonderful supervisor team, Alexandra Sturrock, Kathy Ledbetter and Penny B, along with all the GM staff, and support from my clinical supervisor and colleague, Alison Hunter. And finally, and not the least, I really want to thank the engagement of all the Manchester students, parents and teaching staff who supported and continued to support the project. Thank you very much.